Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. It is Tuesday, March 25th, and I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with legal reporter Jeremy Sharon and archaeology and religions reporter Rosella Turcatin on her first appearance on the daily briefing. Hi to you both.
Hi, Jessica. It's great to be here.
Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning to you both. Good to have you both here. It is day 536 of the war. In the last 24 hours, Israel intercepted 3 rockets fired from North Gaza by Islamic Jihad. The IDF downed a Houthi ballistic missile with debris landing in Beit Shemesh and, of course, sending many thousands of people into safe rooms and shelters. And the IDF said that it struck remaining military capabilities at a pair of Syrian bases. In other news on that front, Hamas published a propaganda clip featuring hostage Elkanah Bochbot and Yosef Chaim Ochana, both looking extremely gaunt, but speaking about what they've been undergoing over the last months. And those are the very latest signs of life from those 2 hostages. There is also reportedly a new Egyptian proposal aimed at restoring the Gaza ceasefire and hostage deal, with supposedly tentative support from the Hamas terror group, although Israel has said that it has not yet received the terms of that particular offer. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem today and every day this week and most of last week, protests have continued throughout the day around the Knesset, around the Prime Minister's private residence on Aza Road, a little farther up near the hostage tent on Balfour and Aza. And that's all as demonstrators are protesting both for the release of the hostages and for the cabinet's decision to fire Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar. We'll look at the specifics of the decision to fire the Shin Bet chief, discussing the latest legal implications of the firing as it is brought to the High Court, as well as a concurrent Shin Bet probe into extreme right elements in the Israeli police. On a different set of subjects, we'll also talk about the archaeological discovery of an ancient garden under the Holy Church of the Sepulchre and sexual activity among religious teens. Stay with us. Okay, Jeremy, let's get started with the latest on the firing of Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar. On our top of our page right now, we have a bunch of articles about this, looking very closely at this situation. And very specifically, there are 2 weeks now until April 8th, when the High Court of Justice will hear petitions that were filed against the government's controversial decision to fire the Shin Bet chief. Let's start with sort of something very specific. Who is filing the petitions? And what does that mean at this stage of the game?
The petitions were filed by several of the opposition parties, including Yesh Atid, Israel Beitenu, National Unity, and the Democrats, and also by some good governance watchdog groups, like the Movement for Quality Government in Israel, the Movement for Integrity in Government, and several other NGOs which do similar work. And essentially, their primary contention is that there is a very big conflict of interest here for Netanyahu and the government to fire the head of the Shin Bet when the Shin Bet is involved in an active investigation into allegedly unlawful ties between senior aides to Netanyahu and the Qatar regime.
So we have the filing of the petitions, and now what you've written about in one of the latest pieces that you have is that the government is responding to the petitions and saying that it doesn't believe that the High Court should intervene in this process. So explain that to us. What are the legal implications of what the government is saying and the fact that you already have these petitions filed, which, as far as I've always understood, is part of the process in this kind of very unusual situation?
So, the court on Friday, immediately after the decision, or just several hours after the decision, issued a temporary injunction freezing the decision, and then called on both sides to file their responses to the request for what's called an interim injunction, which is a more permanent or longer-term legal measure to continue that freeze of the firing of Ronen Bar. And so yesterday, the government filed its response, and the Attorney General's office filed its response. Now, the government gave several reasons for why the court should not intervene. One of the primary reasons it said is that basically the head of the Shin Bet is a domestic security and intelligence service. And the court has traditionally not intervened in security matters. It's the issues of defense and security are a realm of policy where the court has always said it defers to the political echelon and says that it doesn't have expertise to deal with those issues. So that was one of the major contentions of the government, saying this is a who heads the Shin Bet is a security issue which the court doesn't have any right to deal with. And the government also made another interesting point in that, there is huge animosity now between Netanyahu, between the government and between Ronen Bar. This is kind of perhaps facts on the ground now, but the government went ahead with this firing process. Then before actually he was fired, Ronen Bar sent a letter saying that, among other things, the government and Netanyahu were taking actions which were weakening Israel internally. Netanyahu himself has said repeatedly that he does not trust Ronen Bar, or he does not have trust in Ronen Bar that he can do the job properly. And there's so much mutual animosity that the government said in its response to the High Court that the High Court cannot force the government and the prime minister to work with somebody where there is no trust, where the working relationship is broken down. The Attorney General said that she needs more time to compile her full report on and response to the firing of Ronen Bar, which she had said prior to the government's decision was would not be legally lawful. She stated, in no uncertain terms that, and I'm quoting now, the government decision to fire Bar was tainted with fundamental flaws that go to the root of proper administrative process, right? And she basically alleged that the government, in firing Ronen Bar, she said she was essentially alleging that there was no proper cause here, and that there was non-pertinent reasons for firing him, essentially political reasons for firing him. And she said that this will have implications for the functioning of not only security officials but law enforcement officials, because the Shin Bet is also a law enforcement agency, and that this decision will have implications for law enforcement officials to properly and independently exercise their authority in the future.
Okay. We also have the Shin Bet conducting a probe into the possible infiltration of extreme right elements into the Israeli police that is under the charge of National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. What are the allegations here? What are we hearing?
So there was a news report on in the Hebrew media on Channel 12 on Sunday night that the Shin Bet, and in fact Ronen Bar, had allowed or ordered for a probe. It doesn't appear to be a full criminal investigation at this stage, but had allowed for a probe into what he said was Kahanist elements infiltrating into law enforcement. Kahanism is the ideology, founded by the slain far-right politician Rabbi Meir Kahane in the 1980s. He founded a political party called Govt, which was later banned for being racist. It had a far-right ultra-nationalist ideology. Now, Itamar Ben-Gvir's Otzma Yehudit party is the successor, really, to Govt, if perhaps slightly moderated on issues of race. And Ben-Gvir himself lives in the settlement of Kiryat Arba, and around him he's got some extremely militant and far-right advisors, including Rabbi Benzi Gopstein, who has been convicted for incitement to racial hatred, and Hanan Mel Dorfman, who was what's known as one of these hilltop youths who are establishing illegal outposts in the West Bank. Often these outposts are very violent, and Dorfman himself was the subject of Shin Bet probes and investigations. So in December 2024, we found out that the Department for Internal Police Investigations is investigating senior police officials in the West Bank responsible for investigating Jewish extremism in the West Bank against Palestinians, and the suspicions against these senior police officials is that they have ignored or covered up or whitewashed these attacks against Palestinian civilians. So that investigation, together with the Shin Bet concerns that Kahanist elements have infiltrated law enforcement agencies, that's clearly where the focus and the concerns about the infiltration of Kahanist elements, and that was what was reported on Sunday night. And as I said, the Shin Bet initially appeared to say that it was involved in this kind of probe. Then it later denied that there was ever an official investigation. And Netanyahu and Gvir basically accused Ronen Bar of seeking to overthrow the government through this kind of investigation into Gvir and his assistants. But that's where we stand with that issue right now.
Okay, thanks very much, Jeremy. We're going to take a quick break. When we're back, we will talk about what is possibly under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the Old City of Jerusalem. So stay with us. Okay, so Rosella, you are the first reporter to have gotten to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to see the current excavation of possibly showing that grapevines and olive trees once grew on the land under one of the most renowned Old City churches, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which obviously has a very long and complicated history. But tell us what you saw and how you got to see it, how you got to be the first reporter to report on this.
So, first of all, it's obviously an incredible experience to go to this place that is so important to really hundreds of millions of people all over the world, and people come and really they pour their heart and souls into this place, and you feel it in the atmosphere. Now, this specific excavation began in 2012 after a long time that the floor surrounding the current edicle where Jesus is believed to have been buried and then resurrected was really in terrible state. It was to the point that it was considered dangerous. Finally, some 5 years ago, all the communities managing it, which is the Catholic Church, essentially the Armenian Patriarchate and the Greek Orthodox Patriarch, decided that it's finally time to restore the floor. Now, if we're restoring the floor, we might as well excavate under the floor. So that has been happening since 2012. There have been sort of like a couple of sort of like low-profile press briefings in the past, but really this is the first time that the head of the excavation, Francesca Romana Stasolla, who is an Italian archaeologist, has agreed to speak on the record with the reporter. So now, what will we see? We see like that the floor right now is like essentially a temporary floor, and under it, really the archaeologists found what she described as like a book of the history of Jerusalem, which each archaeological layer like connected to a specific time. So what are these specific times? So the church was built in the 4th century CE. What happened before? So this means around 300 years after Jesus is believed to have lived. So, but however, the site was already active, was already occupied in the Iron Age, which means First Temple period, roughly the first half of the first millennium BCE. So what they have found, all sorts of things. It was a quarry, so they found all sorts of things related to the quarry. Carving stones. They found a half-carved stone. They found pottery. They found agricultural tools, and they had new technologies that allowed to also analyze things like pollen remains or seeds. And lo and behold, some of these seeds related to the time of Jesus, so around the 1st century CE, showed that at that time the area was an agricultural area with olive trees and grapes. Now, why is this so special? Because we have a description in the gospel, and specifically in John's gospel, which is believed to have been written with someone who was either directly familiar with Jerusalem in the time of Jesus or with someone who was familiar with it. The area around Jesus' tomb as a garden. And all of a sudden, we see from this really micro archaeology analysis, the garden was there. And so, again, this is science, but it's also, I think, for people who believe, is always very exciting to see how, science somehow gives a glimpse of actually what happened in the scriptures. So it was really a glimpse into this almost over 2,000 years of history of Jerusalem.
Amazing. Okay, now we're going to switch gears to another religion and sort of look at your other beat, which is religions, in terms of the Jewish religion and sex education in Israeli religious high schools. It does happen. I happen to know it for a fact from my own kids have sex education in their schools, but it's somehow expected that religious teenagers are not engaging in sexual activity. Lo and behold, comes along a survey that you wrote about a poll of students, as I understood it, in same-sex schools, and it shows that they are engaging in sexual activity and, in fact, more likely than their co-ed peers to have a romantic relationship with a member of the same sex. Is that one of the findings?
Correct. So what's very interesting that this survey was conducted within the community. The researcher herself is a proud member of the religious Zionist or Datileumi community, and she really came from a place of not wanting to, let's say, judge or express negativity, but rather understand. So even the religious Zionist national religious community is not a monolith. So you have co-ed schools, you have completely gender segregated schools, you have boarding schools, you have mixed schools, for certain time of the day the boys and girls are together, and for certain times they are separated. So she essentially prepared a survey within her PhD research and sent it out to WhatsApp groups and social media and communities. So it's important to emphasize that about 1,000 kids who responded voluntarily, anonymously, and they kind of describe who they are, describe themselves as religious Zionists. They describe what kind of school they go to, and so on and so forth. So what came out is that more or less teenagers ages 16 to 20, whether they go to same-sex schools or to co-ed schools, are as likely to engage in some form of sexual activity or intimate relationship. The percentages are more or less the same. However, while kids who go to co-ed schools are more likely to have intimate contact with members of the opposite sex in same-sex school, more often happens that they have this kind of relationship with members of the same sex. So if we wanna really look at the numbers, we could say that in same-sex schools, around 13% of the boys and 12% of the girls had some form of intimate contact with the same sex. And in co-ed school, it was only 7% of the boys and 9% of the girls. And now, another interesting finding related to this is that, in general, in the survey, almost 40% of the girls describe having experienced some form of same-sex attraction, meaning at some point they might have felt attracted to another girl. Now, this doesn't mean that they, are, members of the LGBT community, that they are, not straight or anything. The researcher made it clear, but she did say that, girls are more likely to experience confusion between what is a good friend, what is, more than a friend, and so on and so forth. And this, once again, is more likely to happen in all girls' schools.
And what's the ultimate takeaway from the poll? What's the idea, in other words, now?
Well, the big question is, if and when you need to have the talk, because what the researcher said is that many parents, I think in general, but specifically in the religious community, think, if I don't talk about sex with my children, sex doesn't exist. They are religious. They want to be religious. And so they're just gonna not do anything about it until they are ready to get married. But what the research shows, and what the researcher was very adamant to advocate, Maur Kaplan, was we need to talk. We need to talk. We need to offer our children an opportunity to ask questions and ultimately make their own decision. And that I come from this place as someone who respects halacha, Jewish law, and I believe that if we give them the right tools, it's going to be easier to actually respect Jewish law as opposed to more difficult.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Rossella. Thanks to both of you, actually, for being on today's Daily Briefing. It's been good to hear the very different things that you're reporting on. So thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Rossella.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. We'll be back again tomorrow with another installment. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. Any comments you have, you can always email us, podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next time, take care, be well, and have yourselves a good week.